When we were talking about the hormonal control of male reproduction, we talked about the hypothalamus and how it is connected to the pituitary gland. So just like within the males, there's this overarching hormone that's produced by the hypothalamus, which is called GnRH. So that's gonadotropin-tropic releasing hormone, GnRH. So that's a hormone that's produced by the hypothalamus, and it regulates the production of FSH and LH. So we'll put that it regulates, we'll put release of FSH and LH. So FSH is really important in stimulating the follicular development in the ovaries. LH is also really important in ovulation. And then it's important in regulating estrogen levels. So let's look at a diagram that shows this, function. Okay, so GnRH can travel to the anterior pituitary and cause the release of FSH and LH. So once it does that, the follicle begins to develop. We have these granulosa cells, which I talked about in the previous lecture, and the thecal cells, that's the thecal folliculi. So the thecal cells produce androgens that are then converted to estrogens. And one of the really interesting things about this is that there is a negative feedback mechanism. That means that you're only releasing, or you're only developing generally one follicle every month. So let's look at that feedback. Okay. So when we increase FSH, we have an increase in follicle development. Okay. The follicles produce estrogen. So they produce estrogen. Small amounts of estrogen, these small amounts of estrogen have a negative feedback on FSH. And this is actually why many birth control pills, for example, have small amounts of hormone, because they're actually mimicking a period of time when you're like preparing to release an egg. So it kind of fakes your body into thinking that you're preparing to release an egg, but you're not, because you're taking in a pill that has low levels of estrogen, which is shutting down your production of FSH. So the small amounts of estrogen have a negative feedback on FSH production. Okay. Now this changes when the follicle gets ready to be ovulated. So there is a, and this actually also has a negative feedback on LH production. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so large amounts of estrogen cause a surge in the release of FSH and LH. And this leads to ovulation. Okay, so let's look at the diagram again. Okay, so FSH is being produced, but then estrogen inhibits the production of GnRH, but also of FSH and LH. So when we get a large input of estrogen, then that causes a surge. And it's the LH surge in particular, they think, that actually causes the oocyte to be ovulated from the ovary. Now, if this doesn't work just right, then some people, some women develop polycystic ovaries, where the ovaries never released the oocytes, and that can be a sign of hormone imbalance in the body, and it's associated with other problems that females have, like weight gain and like acne and that kind of stuff. So polycystic ovaries, and they can be painful actually as well. Supposedly we can feel a little bit of tinge, a little bit of pain when that that oocyte is released, and supposedly that polycystic ovaries are kind of also painful. And you can see polycystic ovaries using an ultrasound. Okay, so this LH surge is what causes it to be ovulated, but then the progesterone, estrogens, and other hormones produced by the corpus luteum actually also act as a negative feedback. So let's go back to that. So the corpus luteum produces estrogens and progesterone that has a negative feedback on FSH and LH. Right? So if you're going to become pregnant, you don't want to start the cycle again, right? You don't want to, like, I'm pregnant, I don't want to release another egg and have a sperm, and then you have like multiple eggs and sperm and embryos at different stages, and all of that would be bad. So we need a means of shutting down follicular development if we are pregnant. And so that is if the corpus luteum is maintained. And then if it's maintained to the point where the embryo then starts to produce a placenta, the placenta takes over control and produces estrogens that keep that cycle of follicular development from occurring while the female is pregnant. So again, let's look at these diagrams are important in that the corpus luteum also shows a negative feedback on your GnRH, but also on decreasing the FSH and the LH so that another follicle is not developed.